بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ishfaq Ahmed.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Yeah. My name is Ishfaq Ahmed. I am a professor of computer science, actually, not a professional imam at the University of Texas at Arlington, and Alhamdulillah, I am also uh, driven by the Spirit and by the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to educate people on Islam. Specifically, I give lectures on the Quran and science, which inshallah I hope I will come here one day. I drove from Dallas this morning and the Prophet. And I also announce scholarships and I guide the young generation college students how to get admission and scholarships uh, in the universities. And I also wrote a book on the Prophet ﷺ, which is outside. I will sign the book afterwards. I should mention that we donate all the proceeds, not just the profit. It's my own investment, no sponsorship, nothing. It's a sadaqah jariyah, and it's the best book on the Prophet ﷺ. Inshallah, you will find it. I promise to you. My purpose here is not to sell the book, needless to say, but I should mention that every copy sold, I donate $10 to the masjid, and the rest also donate. So that aside, I'm here for Friday Khutbah. Jazakallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All praises to Allah and salat ya Khatamin Nabiyyin Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Today's khutbah theme is Islam's anti-racism and anti-prejudice stance. I would like to start with the verse of the Quran. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. The verse has very profound meanings. It says, in these verses are the signs that your Lord created the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your languages and your skin colors, in which are signs for people who have knowledge. It says so many things. First of all, Allah is talking about His might of being the creator of this universe and the earth, which is His biggest creation. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the creation of the heaven is bigger than the creation of mankind. And many people don't know that. So Allah's biggest, the heavens and earth, which is part of it. So Allah is talking about His best creation, and at the same time, Allah is creating about diversity. Imagine the connection, which Allah is saying the diversity of languages and colors next to Allah's biggest sign, which is the universe, to emphasize what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in this. So that's one thing I notice. The other thing I note is diversity is critical for human creativity and activity. If there's no diversity, we all have the same opinion and our creativity comes to an end. Diversity is a significant part of civilization. And many people don't understand that because they try to stereotype people, they try to put people in boxes which are in their minds preconceived. And that is anti-creativity and it's against human intellect. And Allah is saying it's clearly, in these diversity of your languages and colors is designed for people who have knowledge, which tells us all those people who are discriminating against color or race, they are what? They don't have the knowledge. In other words, for the lack of better word, they are ignorant. Maybe they are even stupid. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was the living Quran. Everything he did in his life, every action, every word was following the Quran and demonstrating the Quran as a perfect example. That's why he's called the living Quran. His actions on ensuring lack of racism and prejudice was not just by his words. Many people talk about these ideas without actions. The Prophet ﷺ fought for this proactively and with a lot of conviction. Proactively doing something is different from politically saying something. Just go with the wind. Many politicians stand to take votes and they gather crowd and they just say what the crowd likes to hear. Now go back 1400 years ago at the time of the Prophet. What was happening in Mecca and around the world? Slavery was very common. Islam inherited slavery and fought to eliminate it. Many people in the West criticized the Prophet. Oh, he did not abolish slavery. Slavery is not abolished, just like we have witnessed in this country after the Civil War. Declarations were made, and we still are living with unspoken slavery. Slavery is in the mind of people, which is assuming other people are inferior because of race or color. That is the slavery in the mind. Prophet ﷺ fought to eradicate the root causes of slavery. And I'm going to mention a few events in his life which epitomized the verse which I recited. On his last sermon, the Prophet ﷺ spoke to over 100,000 people in the Arafat Valley. Estimated there were 125 people, all dressed in white, men. And only 8 years ago, he was evicted from his hometown. And my book describes all these conversions and events in very, very detail. But when the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, there were very few hundred converts in 13 years after the first revelations were made. So the success came very slowly. But after he moved to Medina, it continued because he was dragged into defending himself with battles against the invading Meccans and the local Jews. And the exponential success happened towards the last 2 or 3 years in his life, especially the last year, second last year of his life is called the year of delegation, in which multitudes of Bedouins and other tribes flocked to Medina and converted in groups, in thousands. So by the time his last Khutbah came, there were estimatedly 200,000 people, men and women and newborns and converts, all combined. The population of Hijaz and Najd, Makkah and Medina, surrounding areas. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke addressing his followers on the last sermon. He made a few points with regard to Allah's rights, human rights, and women's rights. He said, treat your women kindly. But with regard to race and color, he spoke very precise words. He did not say everybody is equal. People have equity and equal human rights, but everybody is not equal. People of knowledge are higher in status. People who are more pious, they are higher in status in front of Allah. The basic human rights and equity is uniform. So he didn't say who is superior, but he said an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have any superiority over an Arab. So this covers your family or race or your tribe-based elitism, which existed in Mecca and in Judaism and in other religions, Hinduism, and in Mecca before Islam, because Mecca was a market for business and it also had slave market. Slaves were brought from various sources. The sources of slavery was not just abducted slaves from Africa. Actually, slaves also included people of white color and brown color. It didn't matter what the color is. Black slavery was proliferated very late, 200-300 years ago, by the Europeans. Before that, the concept of slavery was not just based on color. It was sources of slavery was prisoners of war. So prisoners of war would also be treated as slaves, and the Quran refers to them what your right hand possesses. So it's important to identify the difference. Is when people say he didn't, the Prophet didn't abolish slavery. He did, because the Quran says all people who are enslaved have to be freed. He did, but he didn't make American style declaration. Also, he made sure when slaves are freed, somebody pays ransom for them. He also said the rights of the slave are equal to the rights of the master, so there is no question of different rights. He practically did many actions. One thing is when he started teaching Islam, some of the earlier converts were slaves, which included different kinds of slaves, not just people who were black like Bilal and Khabab, Arhat, and Sumayya, and a few others, Sahabas. They were slaves, people who would be enslaved after they were captured, especially women and children. That was the Arab culture. So it was a normal thing. Imagine we saying anti-slavery or anti-racism things today. Go back 1400 years ago and imagine yourself in the midst of a culture and somebody saying these things explicitly, that no black has superiority over a white, no white has superiority over a black. Race and color base, this is as distinct as it gets. And he made it very clear What the credit, Prophet ﷺ, the credit he gets is he was saying it against the norm of the society. When the Meccans heard this, they basically reacted. What is he talking about? Confucius didn't talk about it. Other religions didn't explicitly talk about it like that. Aristotle didn't talk about it. And the Prophet ﷺ also equated women's rights, same as men, but in their own capacity, according to their abilities. So that's a different matter. I have too many events which are very captivating in the Prophet's life. And I don't have time to mention all of this. Standing here, time goes by very quickly. So, referring to my book, which has two parts, it's about 700 pages. The first 500 pages describe the Prophet's life, and in part two, I wrote down 100 human attributes of the Prophet ﷺ alphabetically. Each attribute is a small chapter, and I provided arguments why he had that quality. 100 human attributes cover the entire spectrum of human behavior. That's why he's perfect human. And I bookmarked 1,200 events in part one, and I distributed those events as references to these 100 qualities. And the qualities are listed alphabetically. So I read out one quality which is unprejudiced. Some of the things I already described to you, what he tried to eradicate: tribalism, people's elitism based on their wealth, based on their family, based on their lineage. And when he spoke to Abu Lahab, his uncle, and tried to convert him to Islam, Abu Lahab said, I am an elite. I am an elite Quraysh. I am very rich. I am a prominent leader of Mecca. Do I get the same right as Bilal does, for example? Don't I deserve something special? And the Prophet ﷺ said, no, all humans get the same right. And he said, vow to your religion. May your religion perish. Prophet ﷺ received a lot of abuse in his life: verbal abuse, physical abuse, personal abuse. He never took revenge based on personal abuse or anything. But when somebody abused the religion, sometimes the Prophet took action. In this case, the Prophet ﷺ didn't have to take any action because Allah descended the verses. May the hands of Abu Lahab perish, and may he burn in hell, and his wife too. Jamil, who was very active in abusing the Prophet, and she was holding wine and dancing ceremonies, and she would invite poets who would throw verbal abuse at the Prophet. People in Mecca, when they converted to Islam, including some of the prominent companions, they changed. Many of them changed. But sometimes habits are very difficult to change. We all grow up with things and we carry those ideas. Many of us still have biases against people, believe it or not, honestly. Even though we try, sometimes it shows. People living in the same country look up to people of other provinces as problem people, and they don't look at themselves and they think they are better. This is just human thinking. Actually, somebody did some research in psychology, and they said it's embedded in our DNA because this is how we evolved, surviving in forests, viewing other people as dangerous. But this is against common sense and against intellectualism. So the Prophet taught humanity this important consideration. And some of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they still could make a mistake. So what happened is once Bilal was subject to such kind of ignorance. Abu Dhar Ghafari, I'm sure you heard his name, Ghazallah Ta'ala. He once had an altercation with Bilal, and Abu Dhar Ghafari got upset and he said, "You, Bilal, son of a black woman." So it was, before Islam, it was considered to be an abusive word, just like we have still have abusive words in this country and in this society. Although I must say, we live in a great society. This is a great country, but there are problems which we can try to eradicate through education. But Bilal complained to the Prophet, and the Prophet ﷺ called Abu Dhar Ghifari and he said, "Did you insult his mother?" And he said, "Yes." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Clearly, you are still harboring remnants of ignorance. Even though you have become a devoted Muslim, some remnants of ignorance are still on your mind." Abu Dhar Ghifari was a great companion and very high status in terms of his character. He felt he made a mistake and he felt very remorseful. So, you know what he did was he lied down on the floor in front of the Prophet ﷺ and Bilal, and he asked Bilal to put his foot on his chest or shoulder and just stand there as long as he wishes to humiliate him back. And Bilal, wow, what a great hearted companion of the Prophet ﷺ. With the best voice, he did the best adhan, as you know. He wholeheartedly forgave Abu Dhar. So this is one incident which comes to my mind. Speaking of other slaves of different colors, Salman, the Persian, was also a slave. He was a Persian. He was originally belonged. He belonged to a Zoroastrian family, but he did not get convinced that that was a true religion. So he left his hometown in search of the truth. And he has a long story. He was enslaved, and somehow he was sold from one master to another, and he ended up somewhere on Western Asian or Eastern European region, and finally he was brought into Mecca, where a Jewish person bought him, and he put him to work for gardening and other stuff. And Salman had heard of the arrival of an Arabian prophet. So when he heard the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, he actually sneaked out from doing work for his master, and he met the Prophet and he embraced Islam. So he brought some gifts and he says, "This is a charity." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "I don't take charity." And he immediately got uh, shocked in a positive way because he had heard prophets don't accept charity. So he was immediately convinced. And he said, "Please accept it as a gift." And the Prophet accepted the gift and gave it to Salman. Later, Salman the Persian came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "Please uh, somehow pay my ransom. Make me a free person." And the Prophet ﷺ said, and he, as wise as he was, he didn't trust his Jewish master. He said, "Go to your Jewish master and ask him to write down a contract for you, what he will need compensation to get you free." And Bilal went to his master, and his master said, "Don't waste my time. It's not worth it. You cannot afford it." Salman said, "Please, just tell me what your demand is." He said, "Okay, 400 ounces of gold and like 100 date trees you have to plant, and then I will set you free." And Bilal came to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet asked his companions to donate plants. Then he gave those plants to Salman. First he said, "Go dig 100 holes." And then he went there and he planted those trees with his own hands. And then he gave a piece of gold to Salman and he said, "Give it to your master." Salman said, "Oh, Prophet ﷺ, will it be enough?" And he said, "Yes, Allah will bless it and it will equate to the amount your master is demanding." So Salman went back to his master, and his master weighed it, and it was exactly what he required, 400 ounces or something. So he set Salman free. Allah had a bigger plan for Salman because Salman was going to play a critical role at the Battle of the Trench. There are many stories, uh, but I like to stay on time. So, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin. Can you hear me? It's turned off. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin. There's some problem here, brother. Lack of battery? Okay. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallata ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. There's a problem with this on and on. But we are reaching the end. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. I'm gonna do the prayers in English. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please forgive us all. Please have mercy on Muslims around the world, especially our brothers in Gaza. Allah, please spare them from this torture. And please unite us. And please guide us on the follow the footstep of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his son. So that Sadaqallahu Azim.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Allah Akbar. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الجنة والناس الوسوس في صدور الناس الجنة والناس. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.